In just 10 minutes, I'm going to share 5 of the biggest bass springtime fishing mistakes that you don't even know you're making. Now, one of the most overlooked things in spring fishing, of course, is going to be your water temperatures. These water temperatures are going to dictate all your fish's behavior come springtime. So basically, you're going to break down the spring into 3 major categories. That's going to be your pre-spawn, which is going to be your water temperatures anywhere from 40 degrees to 60 degrees. And this category is defined by fish moving out of their wintering holes and pretty much staging up in what we call staging areas. Next, of course, you have the spawn, which is anywhere from 60 degrees to 70 degrees, where those fish move up shallow, make their beds, and of course, make little baby fish. And then, of course, anything 70 degrees and above, you're typically going to run into the post-spawn, where those fish are going to move off those shallow water beds and back to those staging areas that you had in the pre-spawn. The majority of fish are going to be in a very small amount of water. 90% of your fish could only be in about 10% of your water. So if you're fishing in dead zones, areas with no fish in it, no matter what magic bait you have or all the money you spend on your gear, you're just not going to catch any fish. So what's the fix for this? Well, it's not as hard as you might think. Quite simply, you're just going to find some deep water adjacent to shallow water. That could be very well an area where those largemouth bass start to stage in the pre-spawn right before they go and they spawn. And if you need help finding these fish haven staging areas and avoiding those dead zones, check out my free AI fish finding bot, where this interactive tool provides full fishing spot breakdowns and makes sure you're finding fish. It's totally free. I'll leave a link below. It's totally up to you. Now, here's a couple of tricks you could use to learn how to find these areas in your local bodies of water, whether that's a pond or a lake or even maybe a small river system, wherever you might be fishing. And one is to simply use your eyes and see how that wind is pushing the water. Spring is a very windy time of year, and you wouldn't believe how much water wind will actually push. And it's just seeing where those eddies are forming with that moving water. What that usually tells you is there's a significant water depth change, which could be a deep hole. That's definitely worth checking out. So something else that's really going to draw a lot of fish is finding a deep water hole adjacent to shallow water, but also with some kind of secondary structure, whether that's a point sticking into the deep water, or it could be standing timber. It could be lots of different things, maybe even some deep docks, some kind of vertical structure where those fish are going to relate to. They love that kind of stuff in the early spring because keep in mind, they're still cold. So when you have this really warm, sunny days, they're still moving vertically in the water column. They're going to rise up in the water column to warm themselves up. And then when you have a storm in the spring, it gets really cold. It's 32 degrees at night. They're going to drop down in the water column where that water is more stable and they're going to be more comfortable. So a second huge mistake that a lot of fishalots will make out there is they fish the exact same way during the spring without giving a whole lot of consideration to the changing weather conditions. The spring is a super volatile time of year, right? It can be windy and freezing cold one day and beautiful and 75 degrees the other day. Those fish are going to react to each of those changing weather conditions, and so should you when you go out there fishing. Basically, the moral of the story is the super aggressive feeding fish that you had one day are going to be completely shut off the other day, especially if at nighttime you got cold weather move through when you were asleep. So paying attention to the different weather conditions as you move through the spring is going to be critical to getting your presentation and your retrieve just right. A quick little tip here is a great way to do that is actually to get a big bladed, like a Colorado blade spinner bait. And those big blades will really force you to slow down because of the resistance that spinner bait will have in the water column. That's just a quick tip right there to help you slow down and get yourself a little deeper in the water column. And so critical mistake number 3 here is kind of a human way of thinking that we can put fish behavior in our neat little boxes and that they're super predictable all the time. Where they're going to be, what they're going to be eating. They're wild animals at the end of the day, and they're only predictable to a certain point. What this translates into for a lot of fishalots out there is if you caught a bunch of fish last year in a certain spot, it doesn't mean this year they're going to be in the same spot. A lot of fish will like colder water and they'll hang back in those staging areas. Some fish will move shallower a lot sooner. Some fish will move shallower a lot later. Again, these fish have all sorts of different preferences. The advantage to finding those deep water holes adjacent to shallower areas is, quite frankly, you're going to have access to a lot of fish and their different preferences in a small amount of area. So to help you avoid mistake number 4 here, and that is failure to define your staging areas and your spawning areas, let me break down and define both of those so you can narrow down where those fish are. And first, let's start with the spawning areas, which are where fish are going to want to go in order to make their little baby fish. And spawning areas are really going to be defined by three critical things. It's going to be hard bottom composition, it's going to be the correct water depth, and it's going to be protection from the elements. In terms of bottom composition, what you're looking for is gravel, sand, rock, anything hard where those bass can lay their eggs. Largemouth bass will not lay their eggs in like mud or sediment. They're just not going to do it. They need a hard structure to attach the eggs to. And so finding that bottom composition is going to be your step number one. Step number two is going to be the right depth for your sunlight, and that relates to your water clarity. In most of the lakes and ponds in the country, I would say on average, you're probably talking to 2 to 3 feet of water clarity. So in that type of water clarity, the sun is going to penetrate pretty far down, and those bass need that sunlight in order to fertilize those eggs. 2 to 3 feet of water visibility, you can expect bass to lay their eggs in about 5 to 6 feet of water. In muddy water, where you don't have very much water visibility at all, let's say less than 1 foot, like you see in these lakes here, those bass can very easily move super shallow, and they could be laying their eggs in water under a foot of depth. So that third step in protection of the eggs is going to be in like deep pockets on your lakes or reservoirs or rivers, wherever you might be fishing, anywhere where those fish could get into shallow water and it's protected from wind. If you can find areas like that, you're going to find very ideal spawning areas for these bass. And if you find the staging areas, you're going to find the routes that these bass are going to take, and you can hone in on them and catch them every which way from staging areas to spawning areas. Another key way to find staging areas is just to find the fish highways in whatever body of water that you're fishing. And what I mean by that is like your main river channel or your main creek channel that runs through every lake, looking at contour lines, will tell you where these fish will travel all along the lake. It's going to be that deep water corridor that you're going to see right here that those fish are going to move along, and they use that to navigate. Now, if you look along that highway and you see a secondary point sticking into it, just like we discussed before, those are perfect areas for staging areas. And mistake number 5 here really has to do with a lot of garbagey advice out there. A lot of beginning fish lots out there think that they need all that heavy power gear and all that expensive gear out there to catch themselves a bass, right? The problem with using too heavy a line, you're not getting as natural as a presentation with your lures with a lot of heavier gear. A lot of people do the way too hard hook set, so you're ripping hooks right out of fish's mouths. So my recommendation for your gear is, and I say this in a lot of my videos, is a medium power rod with moderate action. This gives you a lot of shock absorption when you do catch a fish, so you're not ripping hooks out of fish's mouths. I also don't recommend line above 10 pounds for your largemouth bass fishing. Furthermore, I use ultralight. This is really light line and really light rods and reels, and quite frankly, these fish that you see here are caught off a 2-pound test line. That's right, 2-pound test line, and a lot of those fish are coming out of cover, and these are largemouth bass in staging areas in the pre-spawn, just like we're talking about in this video. And those light lines and light lure presentations are absolutely triggering a ton of bites. And avoiding these critical mistakes will absolutely allow you to catch more fish, but these tips really won't mean that much unless, of course, you know how to find the fish. So go ahead and check out this video right here, where I go deep into some spot dissections using a very unique tool that's absolutely free and absolutely available to you to catch a lot more fish. So go ahead and check that out, Fishalots. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you out there on the water.